Well, dude, it's not every day you get to sit down and just kind of reminisce with you were one of my first friends I ever had in this world. I think we were probably 7 or 8 years old when we first met. And it's been kind of fun to watch your career progress. And this podcast, one of the things I love about it is it gives me a chance to go and meet back up with some of these, friends I had in the past. And we've obviously stayed in touch, but to kind of watch your story develop over the last decade or so has been quite fascinating. I remember, so for those that are, unfamiliar with Eric's story, you just released a book called Dispatched, which tells your story. And I love this because so many times, especially right now, like there's this huge problem with society and cops and things like that. It's been very popular. And what I liked about your book is you kind of touch on some of those. You talk about some of the difficulties of being a cop, trying to separate church and state, trying to be a good guy versus the law of mercy and justice and everything else. So it's just been fun to kind of watch your journey throughout the years, man. You've had quite a ride.
Yeah, thanks. A quick funny story. So I'm sure you remember this, but when I was in third grade, I was suspended a couple times, and one of them was because of us. I don't know if you got suspended, but
I'm sure I did.
We got into a shoving match. So basically, Jimmy would he'd be the quarterback of one team every recess, and I'd be the quarterback of the other team, and we would just battle. And I remember one time because we'd even play in the snow, and Jimmy had these huge moon boots.
Dude, those had been passed down from like 4 of my brothers.
He had these huge moon boots, and one of them, as Jimmy said hike and went back, one of them fell off. And Jimmy would run with these huge socks just flopping in this mushy snow, and then he'd do the sidearm throw. And if anybody that's watching hasn't seen Jimmy throw, he's awesome. Like he's
Wait, what did we get suspended for?
Just pushing each other
in the middle of the game, or what?
Yeah, we just started pushing, and somebody yelled at us. And
gotcha. I remember in 6th grade we got suspended. Remember that kid beat up our friend, and we all went and made amends for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We didn't beat the kid up, but we threatened him hard enough that we all got suspended for a day. But that was one of those like proud moments of suspension.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they had to suspend us, but we had to stick up for our friend.
Absolutely.
I think his name was like Shorty. He was tiny. He was like the smallest guy in school.
I do remember that.
The one that we stood up for. Well, good stuff, man. Well, before we kind of jump into the whole cop thing, dude, you have kind of a fascinating history. You became a country singer.
Yeah.
Tell us how that even happened and how because obviously you...
So I came home from my mission early. I served a LDS mission, but I came home early, which is something you don't do. And because of depression, I had a really, really rough time with depression at that time. I came home early and I just hid myself in my basement and didn't want to see anybody. And then I found music. I started singing online. I mean, this is crazy, especially 15 years ago. It was a Yahoo. Do you remember Yahoo?
Of course, yeah.
Karaoke chat room. And I had never sang before. And I was listening to these people. I'm like, what is this? So I started practicing this Garth Brooks song over and over. So that sparked a whole new life in me, music. And I started going to karaoke places. I won a karaoke contest. Then I entered a contest called Nashville Star. And I remember I went to a Kenny Chesney concert, and I was with one of my buddies, Scott Cowan. And I said, I'm going to be on stage. I'm going to. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to. And so within a year and a half, I had signed on to a small record label headed by Evander Holyfield,
right,
the champ. And I was opening up for Colin Ray. And so that's the path I thought I was going to go.
Well, let me touch base on something real quick there. So you, because, most of our audience listening is not necessarily LDS. Some are. We're here in Utah. It's probably half and half. But coming home from the mission, I mean, that was like I don't think it's as much now. Maybe it still is. But that was a huge stigma of something you didn't do. And
right.
Especially most people just assumed it would be for worthiness issues
right.
if you came home. So walk us through a little bit, because I think depression is one of those things we try to touch on that every now and then on the podcast and kind of helping. So how did you know that you had that issue, and what was daily, what was going through, like what is somebody in that situation dealing with to the point that it caused you to have to come home from your mission?
I could not function. I couldn't think. I was crying every 15 minutes, just in tears, bawling. And I was out in California. And finally, the mission president and the leaders of the mission came to me and they said, what's going on? And I said, I don't know. I've never felt like this before. And I think it was a situational depression too, just a ton of stress at once. And so then they asked, well, what did you do? You know,
Yeah.
what did you do? I'm like, I didn't do anything, you know? And I ended up going home early, and it was really rough because it's something that you just typically don't do, is come home. But it ended up being it ended up being one of the best things for me, because now I can understand with empathy people that are struggling with depression and anxiety.
Well, and that is one of those reasons why, you know, I think even as a cop, and we'll get into your story a little bit, I just read your book. It just came out, what, a month ago?
No, it's been a little while, but I just put it online for free.
Got it, a month ago. Okay. But because the book, you talk a lot of these, you have a lot of empathy. And I think that's one of the things that where, you know, there's good cops and bad cops, just like any profession, you have good and bad, right? And I think the majority, the high majority of cops are out there doing a lot of good. But sometimes those moments of empathy are almost frowned upon in your industry. You ran into that a couple of different times.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. That's why I talk a lot about the whole issue around statistics and policing, because I think one of the problems, and don't get me wrong, we 100% need police officers, and we need good police officers, but what I saw, at least in the department that I was working for, everything is based on stats. It's all on your statistics. So essentially, you're not, when you go to promote or you go to, you know, advance your career, the first thing they do is pull your stats. And that includes arrests, tickets, all of these things, because that's how they measure whether you're good or not.
Well, it's almost like a mission, right? It's like they want to see how many baptisms you've had and how many people you've converted, but it's like that kind of goes against the law of like just being out there loving people and trying to, and you see how it does mess people up. Both, I'm sure you saw as a cop and I saw as a missionary, like when people get caught up in those numbers, and we're just human, like you want to be the best, you want to have high numbers if you're keeping score of them,
right?
But it actually goes counterintuitive to love.
It does, because now when you're in a situation where you feel like you need to either give them a break or just talk to them, give them like a stern warning, but at the end of the day, you know, you have to turn in your 20 tickets, you know, because when I was on the motorcycle unit, we had to do 20 points. And a point was one ticket.
Wow.
And then a DUI was worth 10. So at the end of the day, those were your goals, but pretty soon if you don't hit your goals, then you get removed, you know.
Wow.
And so in a lot of police departments, that's how it's all based off of your stats. And then there's a huge money dilemma, because if the city's not properly funded, they push the numbers even harder. And then who pays for that? Well, the citizens pay for that. And so that's why I started talking publicly about police quotas, and ultimately, and it's in my book as well, about the bill that was passed to ban police quotas, and that was one of the scarier.
Did it pass?
It did.
Awesome.
Yeah, it did.
When did that go down?
2018.
Oh.
And so when I told my story about police quotas, because when our sergeant came in and said, you have to have 5 by the time you're done. And when I say 5, I mean misdemeanors. So we had to go out and five misdemeanor tickets per day, per shift.
Wow. So you're like just creating, and see, that's where I had so many issues. Like with me, like I've had situations. I've always said the good cops, their entire job is to de-escalate any situation. Like that's essentially the only thing they need to do. Any kind of bad situation, de-escalate it, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember a few times, man, like cops coming up, like we were at a football game once, just minding our own business, and this cop lost it on, you know, one of us, and started throwing him around, and it was like I've never felt so much anger towards someone in my life, because we seriously were just minding our own business. He got him essentially for, he said trespassing, but we had permission to be there. It was just like this crazy situation. It was like, you get why people have outrage, right?
100%.
And that was just me, one stupid experience. Imagine getting pulled over.
Think about a white officer in a minority neighborhood, and they have to hit their numbers. So then everybody's saying this is racism, this is racism, this is racism. When really, what I believe, most of the time, it's because of quotaism. It's because they've got to get their stats.
When they know where they can go find people doing things, even though it's not really.
That's right.
Dangerous to the public or affecting anybody. They know where they can go find somebody to get them arrested.
And so people always say, well, why? Well, it's about, number one, it's about money. It's about kind of just the way that policing's been in the last, I don't know how long. Just certain administrators, that's how they measure. And it's just built on the wrong premise. I think in many instances we should be a lot like firemen, and we go when we're called.
Right.
And we're supposed to be there to serve and protect. And there's many cities that are properly funded where they're not pushed, but there's many cities that aren't properly funded where they have to get the courts, they have to pay their judges, and they can't do that without tickets. And so then go off. And then you got to bring in your tickets.
Yeah, I've never thought of that way. It's like you would never have quotas for firemen, right? Like you guys have to put out so many fires.
But it's the same. It's the same idea.
Sure.
Because when you
firemen have such a good vibe with this.
Right.
Everyone, right? Everyone looks up to firefighters.
Right.
Like when was the last time you're like, oh, firefighters? Those guys.
See, but then there's times when there's people that are doing certain things that they need to be arrested for.
Sure.
But so that's why officers need to have discretion. And if it was my world, you would not promote somebody based on statistics.
Well, and so let's back up again. So you're into country music. It's going pretty well. You're opening for Colin Ray. I remember when you did that, and you're working with Evander Holyfield. Which, by the way, how did you even get to meet Evander Holyfield?
It's really God. It's one of those God things. You just know that it's like I got a phone call, and it was Evander Holyfield, the heavyweight champ. I mean, we would watch him. You know, we would have people come and pay at my house to watch him and Mike Tyson brawl.
Oh yeah,
and he was always a hero to me, always. And then when he called and said he had I just knew that it was God in the details. And so since then, he's been a great mentor, and he texts me every single morning.
Yeah, this has been 10 years. You guys are still.
Oh yeah, we talk all the time, and we got to get him on your podcast. And he's been incredible. Like he's been a great mentor to me, and so. But once I got married, and we had our first child, Stacy and I knew that it wasn't the path that I should be going down for a family.
Is that because you were just traveling so much and the money's hard to come by at that point?
Yeah, and it was at the time when the music industry was going down because everyone could just download a song. So there's 25 major record labels in Nashville down to like 4. And so we met with the guy that had just been at Sony Records, and he said, the odds of you actually making it, you have better odds becoming an NFL quarterback.
Really?
And I said, well, I've got a great arm. but that's the odds. And I just had this feeling like I know I could do it. I know I could push and push and push, but at what cost? Because being newlywed, having our first child, I just knew in my heart that it wasn't the lifestyle for us.
And so you decide, I'm going to go be a cop instead?
So then I go on a ride along with this guy in my ward at my church, and he's on the gang unit and the SWAT team. And I went out with him one night, and I just fell in love. And that's where it started. And God, I want to say I was 25.
So that was how many years ago? 12 years ago? 13 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay. And so once you became a cop and whatever else. So how quickly, because you ended up being a cop for what?
8 years.
8 years. And we'll get into kind of what happened and everything. But tell us a little bit, what did you love about being a cop? Like first let's start with that. Because you really, in reading your book, I caught this, but you really had a passion for it. Yeah,
I even get the chills just thinking about it because you truly could. I wanted to get into it to help people, and 99% of police officers, when you're in the police academy and they go around, why did you do this? Why did you do this? 99 out of 100 will say, I want to help people, and because you are in incredible opportunities to just help in the most distress, in the most emergency situations, when you're there to help somebody and you can. There's no better feeling. To me, there's no better feeling, especially when you do something that's out of the norm to help somebody. Mm-hmm. Like pay for somebody runs out of gas and you can fill up their car or do something crazy and they just are blown away. To me, that's what drove me. And then just putting on the uniform, there was something about, I just felt like it was like putting on Batman's uniform, every single day. You just, because you feel like you're making a difference.
Well, in the book, you give some specific examples. Why don't you share a couple of just to give us everyday life as a cop where you get an opportunity to change somebody's life? I know you had plenty of them, but do you have one that sticks out or something you can share?
Yeah, I have one. And it kind of goes into the church and state thing, because that's a big topic. Well, where's the separation of church and state?
Well, this is kind of what started problems for you, too.
It did,
right?
absolutely did. Absolutely did. Because we started, people would call us the God Squad on the bike squad, because we got into, getting homeless people to go to church, and so this one guy, his name was Robert. I would see him drunk for years at Pioneer Park, and one day he was sober, and I looked at Robert and I just said, "Man, what's the occasion? Why are you sober?" And we just started laughing, and I said, "What brought you to Utah?" And he said, "God brought me to Utah. God told me to come here." And I just had this overwhelming feeling that I needed to talk to him about what I believed. And so I did. I started talking about it. And I said, there's a show that I feel like you need to go see. It's at Temple Square. It plays in, and I knew the times when it played because I'd always send people to it.
Okay.
And I said, it plays in about 30 minutes. Do you want to go to it? And he said, yeah, I got nothing else to do. So I went and picked up my car, my patrol car, put him in the back, didn't search him, and I'm thinking, okay, am I crossing the line now? Because now I have a homeless guy. I'm taking him up to a church movie as a police officer. Well, long story short, he gets out of the movie. He was crying, and I said, "What did you think about it?" And he said, "It was amazing. It was great." I said, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" And he said, "Well, God told me to go back to my mama's house." And he was this little black guy from the South. And that's what he did. I gave him my card, and he was gone. And I didn't see him for 6 months. And then I got a phone call from him, and he said, "Officer Eric, this is Robert. Do you remember me?" I said, "Yeah, I remember you." And he said, "I just want to let you know I found your missionaries, and I'm getting baptized." And I remember I just went silent on the phone. And he said, "And my mom's getting baptized too." And those are the kind of moments, Now some people would say you're absolutely wrong because you can't bring up God as a government official. But my whole take is no.
Well, it's fascinating. It's kind of one of those things that in 2019, it's not popular to do what you did, right? Like the popular thing is to say, no, you can't do that. Like God needs to stay out of government. But if you look at the founding fathers as an example, they had God in everything. Like the country really was. And there's certain principles. I think it was Abraham Lincoln or somebody one time, maybe I'm misquoting it, but somebody said, "What is the strength of the United States, or why are they so strong as a nation?" And he said, "Their strength is found in their local churches." I've always thought of that quote because
I think it was de Tocqueville.
Okay,
Alexis
fair enough. But and the thing is, it's like when you really think about that, it's such a community is such an important thing. And whether you took him to a church for whatever religion it might have been, that dude needed something. That dude needed some change in his life.
Today
right?
He is not homeless.
Right.
I talked to him last week on the phone.
Right.
We're great friends. It's like, okay, well, if I wouldn't have done that, where would he be? I think he'd still be in Pioneer Park. And
you got a lot of flack though, right?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. I mean, the very first person I baptized was a homeless crack dealer. He was a drug dealer. The very first person I baptized. And unfortunately, he's in prison right now, but he still calls and we talk. But the point is the separation of church and state was never meant to keep religion out of people's lives. It was meant that the government couldn't force one particular faith or idea on the people.
Yeah, that came from the Church of England.
Right. Now, if I would have said, "Robert, pull out my Glock, we're going to go see a show," that's the separation of church and state. This is what you're going to do, and if you don't do it, we're going to kill you. So
do you think that's hard for people in Utah? Because Utah is so predominantly LDS, right, Mormon, that I think it's for a lot of people, it's like anything they can push back on, they do. And I think this is what happened to you. You got caught in that trap of all the people that wanted to fight back against, the LDS church here in Utah. And so why don't you kind of give us a little bit of background. From there, you kind of start running into a little bit of trouble, and then kind of where your story takes place.
After so that night when my sergeant wanted exactly five misdemeanors, I said no. I came in with three. I came in with three on purpose, just because I wanted to. I challenged it. And
at this point, were you in a good position with the squad?
I was going up the ranks.
Okay.
A great reputation, but I had this strong feeling that I had to tell him no, and I did. And he made me stay after shift to arrest two more people, an extra hour. I didn't get paid for it, and I wouldn't do it. And so that's when problems really started to happen, because now my name started to get tainted within the upper administration. Like that guy, but I was never written up. Well, I was never written up because how could you write somebody up for that? And so then I started to put in for positions. I wasn't getting picked up. I wanted to know. I didn't know why. And finally, I found out it was because of this. I was insubordinate. Against the quotas. And so finally, I tried out for the motorcycle unit, and I didn't get picked up. So I went to the sergeant and asked, "Hey, why didn't I get picked up?" "Well, I guess there was something that you were insubordinate." So I had to explain my story. I went to the deputy chief, explained my story. And I think he knew when we met that I probably was going to say something if I didn't get picked up. And so I kind of dug my own grave because they picked me up within a week. So now I'm on the motorcycle unit, and I was a complete outcast. Like I had maybe 2 friends, but they would kind of be my friend when no one was looking.
So the cops they're really like there's like this clickiness to
absolutely.
it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like,
and
for me, they just that makes no sense.
And in Salt Lake City, for whatever reason, it was even worse because it was really hostile towards people that would go to church, and it was a lot of people that either had left the church and now they're really hostile, really mean things, and I didn't really care that much, but it started getting out of control. They would put Angel Moroni, that's one of our old ancient prophets. They would put Angel Moroni on my motorcycle helmet. Hey, have you read your golden book today? Things like that. And I just tried to keep to myself. And then that's when, then the whole parade thing.
So let's get into that a little bit.
This was in 2013. No, 2014.
Okay.
2014 is when that happened. And so one of the sergeants in the motorcycle squad, he wanted me gone from day one. In fact, he didn't want me picked up in the first place. And so we got an assignment that they wanted 5 of us, I believe it was 5 of us, to come in on after our 40-hour work week and celebrate, actually be participants in the LGBT parade. And when I looked at the assignment, I thought, well, a couple things. We were allowed to trade other officers to take positions if we could get it traded. And so at that time, I felt, and I would feel the same way today, I felt like extremely uncomfortable to be a participant in that parade specifically, just because of a host of reasons. But I had no problem working the actual event, being there to provide security, to just stand guard, making sure that they have their speech, because there's a difference. I believe there's a difference between actively participating as a participant in a parade, like doing.
So they wanted you to do what exactly?
Well, with the motorcycles, they would kind of do these celebration spins. Have you ever seen cops do that? Right. So they wanted us to do that in front of the parade. And I said, "Hey, it looks like we're participants." Well, and the sergeant said, "Well, we are." And I said, "Well, I don't want to look like I am participating in this, because it looks like I'm advocating a lot of messages within the parade." And so back and forth, the city said, "Well, we do advocate this." And I said, "Well, I don't think it's a good idea because where does the city draw the line? How can they say yes to all of these free speech parades, but then come and say no? Like, for example, what if the KKK wanted us to put on, or wanted the city to celebrate in their parade? What if there was a Jewish person that was being asked to celebrate in a Muslim parade? There's tons of different things, that you could think of. And so ultimately, I felt like it went against my conscience, and that's why I tried to get a trade. Well, when I got a trade with another cop, so I basically said, "Hey, will you be in the parade?"
And are these trades pretty common?
Every single event. In fact, my sergeant, that event, he got out of it entirely because he didn't want to be there at all. Every single event, trades happen. And so I got a trade. And the sergeant, an hour later, sent an email saying, "No trading." So I read the email and I thought, he knows that I just got a trade, or else he wouldn't say, no trading. So then I sent an email back up the chain of command that just said, hey, I don't understand. We've always allowed trades. Why now all of a sudden? So then I had to explain myself. I said, you have to understand that I love all people. I love gay people. But I don't want to look like I'm an advocate for this. But I'll be there to protect it. And so, long story short, it went up the chain of command. It went to the chief of police, to the mayor, I believe, and they took my badge for discrimination. And that's when my entire life changed. I mean, it was overnight.
What was it? It became a national story, right?
Yeah, it was.
And so what do you think happened there? Why did it become such a big deal if it was something that was so common?
I think because the city wanted to prove a point, and they wanted to show, because within hours, the city was out on the steps saying that we don't tolerate bigotry, bias, or hatred, when their policy clearly states that they cannot comment on open investigations. So they opened up an investigation for discrimination. They put me on administrative leave, and they took the story to the news. And now looking back, we believe we know why, because there was a sexual harassment scandal going on within the police department. One of the head chiefs, he was actually the chief of internal affairs. He was put on administrative leave 10 months prior. Well, he was put on administrative leave when he would have been fired in any other situation, but he needed to get his 20-year pension. So the chief...
He was 10 months away?
He was 10 months away. So the chief put him on administrative leave for 10 months.
Wow.
Well, as soon as the news got a hold of it, they kept asking, what's going on? Well, the city kept saying, we don't comment on open investigations. But then as soon as he got his 10 months, his 20 years, he gets to retire, full pension. Well, 28 minutes later, after that story came out in the news, the chief's sexual harassment, officer refuses gay pride parade.
So you were maybe a decoy?
100%.
Wow. And so what happened? Like, for those that, you're in that situation, give us an idea what what's going on in your life at that point then.
Yeah, so my whole world turned upside down. I resigned from the police department. The reason why I resigned is because I did not feel comfortable working in an environment that, number one, didn't want me there. I wasn't going to fight to stay in an environment where they don't want me. That's how I felt ultimately, and I knew how they work, because even if you navigate yourself through that, they're going to find something else on you. It's kind of like a cop. When a cop's behind you,
yeah, that's why you get nervous. They're like, there's something they can bust me for.
There's a million laws, and so. And it's worse in a police administrator. If they want you gone, they will fire you. And they will find a reason, whether it's A, B, or Z. And so that's why I resigned. And it was probably the hardest thing that I've ever done. Probably the best thing that looking back now, was the greatest thing that's ever happened. Just the opposition. But we couldn't pay our bills, Did you ever follow the case with the cake baker in Colorado?
Colorado, I know of it a little bit.
Okay, basically, they wanted to have him bake a gay wedding cake, and he said, hey, it goes against my conscience. They can have anything else in the store. I just don't want to participate in making this cake. Well, it went to the Supreme Court. He won. Why I bring that story up, because he sent our family $500 in the mail. His name's Jack Phillips.
Oh, wow.
And so we had little tender mercies from God over and over and over, just letting us know I'm here.
So looking back, do you wish maybe you just did the parade, or do you think that it didn't matter? Eventually they were going to find a reason to...
Yeah. Looking back, I would have actually full on refused it. Like, I wish I would have been a little bit more stern.
Did you end up doing the parade?
I did not. No, I didn't even get a chance to.
Got it. It hadn't even happened yet.
Yeah, even though I told him, hey, I'll do this, but I'm just letting you know my reservations. I'll still do it. I'll be there for practice, but I'm having reservations.
So wasn't there some opportunities that came out of that, though, where you got to actually do some things with some of the LGBT community?
Yeah.
Things like
Well,
that?
basically, there was a bill that came forth the following year that was a balance between religious freedom and gay rights, and it was a non-discrimination on both sides. And so I got to go up to the Capitol. I met with the governor, I met with the lawmakers, and I got to testify about why we need to protect each other and why it's okay to disagree with each other and still love one another. That's been my message the whole time. It's okay that somebody feels that somebody's not comfortable in, say, going to a temple parade. You know, like, could you imagine trying to force a cop in a temple parade and they say no? You know, that they should have the right to do that.
Well, I think what I try to tell people, I say, look, wherever you are at in the spectrum of, like, call it conservative and liberal for lack of better terms, right? I always say, like, you need to give space for people to get wherever you think they need to be. Right. Like, it's to not try to understand the other person and say, look, I understand that you come from a background that's super conservative or super liberal, and people just want to make the other side wrong or whatever else. But so that place in the middle where you can actually have some compassion and understanding and try to say, you know what, I don't believe what they believe. I'm willing to stand with what I believe because that's who I am. But there's got to be that space there, which is what kind of sounded like what you were fighting for, is that space to say, look, they're okay if they want to be that way. I'm okay if I want to believe this way. And we need to be able to coexist and work together.
Well, the crazy thing is, over the past few years, I'm more just getting government out of marriage entirely. Like, why should the government, you know, be in somebody's marriage at all? It's like, I don't care if you get married and whatever you, as long as you're not hurting kids, you know, do whatever you want. Just don't force me to believe what you're doing. You know, it's like when I
think that's where most people are. It's like you hear, like, you know, the whole thing just happened with the Jazz, right? And the racist dude. Yeah. And it's like racism is a real thing and it exists. But I think more times than not, like Utah, you see it in that. So people say, you know, like, well, it's a racist community. It's like, it's really not. Like, most people are unfamiliar, I will say, a lot of times with things. So, like, you know, the gay and lesbian thing, a lot of people aren't familiar. A lot of people in Utah, have never associated with a gay or lesbian person. So it's uncomfortable. It's unusual. Same as, honestly, with people of different races a lot of times here in Utah. It's one of the things I love about traveling so much is it exposes your mind to all these different people and ideas. You really get a full understanding of people more. But I think that racism gets thrown out there, or like hatred towards LGBT, and a lot of times it's simply misunderstanding. Now, that guy, turns out, was a racist. His Twitter feed was pretty bad. He's an idiot. But, like, as a community, I just don't feel, and I think, you know, Rudy Gobert said the same thing. He's like, I don't ever feel racism here. It is, but there's an uncomfortability, and that's where I kind of push people to go a little, maybe do things that make them a little bit uncomfortable to try to.
Right. Well, so I went to this, it was called, something Angels. I can't remember the exact name of it. But it was a group of conservatives and a group of progressives, and they came together a couple weeks ago. And it wasn't to change each other's minds. I think it's Better Angels. Better Angels is what they're called. And it was one of the most eye-opening things I've ever been to.
What did they have you do?
They just had us talk about our philosophies while the other group would ask questions. And it wasn't gotcha questions. You couldn't ask gotcha questions. And we just wanted to understand. Well, I came in and I was sitting right next to a transgender person. So male to female, transgender. So the whole time I'm thinking, oh, please don't say he, don't say him. So I'm thinking, you know, just call her she, because I just didn't want to, you know, gender what they wanted to be called. The very first thing that came out of my mouth was he. So I said, heel grab, and someone said shield, and I'm like, and he's like, or excuse me, she said, oh, don't even worry about it, and immediately made me feel like, oh, and then we started talking. By the end of the thing, this person, her name was Tisha, ended up being my favorite, you know?
Well, I think that's one of the things, like, people, especially with the internet, right, like, they're so mean to each other online, but like when you sit down, it's such a great idea, whoever put that together, by the way, because when you sit down and you're sitting with somebody and you feel their love, you feel their energies, you feel their pains, it's very hard. Brene Brown talks about this all the time, so I'm always quoting her, but, you know, like, lean into people, right? And when you get in those situations, it's very hard not to love somebody once you've heard their story. It's very hard not to be able to see somebody else's side. Like, we want to just, you know, it's a huge conflict in the U.S. right now. It's just these polarizing positions on everything. It's like, gives, that the gift that transgender woman gave you was giving you a space to not fully be where society says you need to be able to know that she gets to be called this.
And I respect that.
Right. It wasn't that you were trying to be.
Yeah. See, where I have a problem is when the government tries to force somebody to say a certain pronoun or a certain thing. That's where I get really passionate. Yeah. Like, don't allow the government to come in and with a gun and say you're gonna do this. You're gonna say this. You're gonna believe this. Because now we've got the separation of church and state. Now you've got the government forcing an idea on the people. So that's my whole thing, But we just need to be more decent to one another.
Well, so after having been through 8 years as a cop, you're no longer with the force. Obviously, moved on with life and everything else. You're in your beautiful home here in St. George. Looking back, what's caused this division between cops and society, and what can both cops do? What can people do to try to kind of mend it back together?
Well, read my book first, because you'll understand where.
And by the way, people get that where can they get that at?
Okay, so Dispatch is available on Amazon. So if you just type in my name, Eric Moutsos, hopefully it'll be on the Eric Moutsos Amazon. Dispatched is the book. You can get on Amazon, and then right now you can actually read it for free on my webpage. So if you just go to ericmoutsos.com. So if you don't have any money for the book, you can just read it right from your phone. Just go to ericmoutsos.com, and then under menu it'll say the book.
Perfect.
But start there, because you'll understand where cops are coming from, why most cops got into it, and how they're pinned. They're literally pinned between bad administrative policies like quotas, like pressure to stop and to get these numbers, and then the public. So that thin blue line that you hear about, like the thin blue line, it gets even thinner, and I believe it's going to get even worse in times to come, because we need law. We need order in this society, especially in a morally bankrupt society.
Well, one of the stories in the book I remember is you talked about, I think it was one of your partners, it was a tow truck situation, and how that affected you.
Yeah, he did the right thing. I was nervous out of my mind, because we were there was a parking enforcement officer that wanted to impound their car, and they were at the shelter. It was a mom and a dad and their 4 kids, and they were in a really bad spot. They had to come down to the shelter, but they couldn't leave their van anywhere, so they wanted to impound the van. And I just knew in my heart it was wrong. My heart was thumping. The tow truck got there, and all of their stuff was in it. I mean, everything that they owned was in this van. And as the tow truck driver got there and started to pick up the car, my partner said, "Put it down. Put it down now." And I couldn't believe it. Like, he did the right thing. And we eventually ran to a hotel and got the manager to allow this family to park their van at the hotel. And I never saw him again. But the question is if it would have been impounded, they could still be there today, because maybe they didn't have a car, all their stuff, and they could be homeless. And so that changed me. I mean, it really did. It changed me. And so after that, I just tried to listen to my conscience more and just do the right thing. And unfortunately, in this day and age, when you do the right thing, especially when you have administrators that basically feed on sometimes doing the wrong thing, you get in trouble.
So Utah changed the law, though. That's for quotas.
Yeah.
Do other states still have quotas? Is the majority of them still?
Utah still does. Like, there's a lot of agencies that just don't necessarily say it now, but it's going to take a lot more officers to come out and say, hey, there's still a lot of pressure here. And so the law has been changed. It's more of a conversation that got started. When I testified about the quotas, there was, I don't know how many police chiefs were behind us. So I sat here with microphones just like this, and I was so nervous. And
you're afraid of getting pulled over ever?
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. So there was all these police chiefs from all over the state. They were testifying against the bill, saying, we don't have quotas, but we're against the bill. And the whole time I'm thinking, if you didn't have quotas, why would you be here testifying against it? Why would it matter? So anyway, because their whole thing was, we need to measure performance. And my whole thing is, no, you don't. You don't need to measure performance because the whole performance is, I believe, is on the wrong premise. We need to measure. Why can't we measure? How many little kids did we give high fives to? How many people did we help versus how much money did we bring into the city? And so, as I testified, Salt Lake City Police, and this is in the book too. The department came out on the news. I mean, they came out on the news and said, he's not telling the truth. He is lying about me. Mm-hmm. So I released an audio because absolutely, I recorded my sergeant on my phone about the 5 misdemeanors per day.
And what happened after you released that?
The bill passed. It just flew right through the House, the Senate. Governor signed it. And then they went silent. And then a few weeks later, I get a screenshot from one of my buddies from the police department. They had a policy change. Well, the policy change was nothing about quotas. It was, you cannot record supervisors. And so that was another policy change that has my name on it.
Well, I think one of the things that came out of your whole situation and story, though, I mean, you did hopefully affect a lot of change for the good. And as far as like, doing things out of love and respect as opposed to just trying to get a quota or trying to hit these numbers.
Yeah, it's the bill passed, the religious freedom bill passed, and so hopefully my story will get people thinking, because that's ultimately what I hope that my book will do, is to get people to think in the situation that they're in, whether it's at work or government or when something doesn't feel right, it's usually because it's not right. And so even though you're going to get opposition, you're going to get possibly retaliation, just speak up, because your voice really does matter. Like, I truly believe that every single person's voice matters, and just try to do it. Even really polarizing topics, you can still do it with love, I believe. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we're guilty of, polarizing ourselves. But my whole take is, religion, politics, the two kind of no-nos that you just don't talk about it. Because when you talk about it and you start to articulate yourself, you just naturally will sharpen up.
Well, I think it's important to talk about it from a lens of, let me understand you, I want you to understand me, as opposed to let me convince you I'm right, you're wrong, or anything like that. Right. And that, to me, everything kind of became gray to me. Like, nothing's black and white anymore. To me, it's like, what's your motive? What's your intent?
Yes.
I remember when I went to Arizona State, there was an old joke. You don't want to bring up on a date sex, religion, or politics. If you said you were from Utah or that you were Mormon, you just brought up all three. It's like, I used to say I was from Arizona. I was like, well, it's easier to deal with. But
that's awesome.
Well, dude, I appreciate you, Matt. I think that your story, it's a fascinating story, and it's been fun to follow you, and honestly, love the book. You tell a couple other really cool stories. It really gives some good insight to somebody that's never been a police officer, kind of those internal dilemmas you're dealing with, good versus evil, what's right versus what my sergeant wants me to do. A lot of that comes out in the book, and I just thought you did a really good job articulating it. So I think, yeah, if you guys are interested to see a little bit of more of a perspective of what cops go through, and kind of some of the pains and worries they have on a daily basis.
And it's even worse now. I mean, with body cameras and the perception. I mean, I don't know how anyone does it now.
Wow.
I don't know how anyone gets into it now.
Well, hopefully it'll help people appreciate cops a little bit more.
I hope so. I hope so, because they're going through it, and we need them. We need good cops, and I'm just really thankful for the opportunity to go through what we went through. I've been super blessed since. I've been able to find myself reinvent myself on a whole nother level. I'm in sales now, and so I'm just really thankful for it, because I feel like I've been really blessed because of the opportunity. And thank you for having me on this show.
That was great, man.
And I appreciate it.
Appreciate you, dude. Thanks, man.